despair. No religious barrier. But because I am a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote.
So now you know which religion was chosen to influence governmental policies in America, still to this very day. And both the church and the state are said to be good things because they somehow fill an imaginary gap that some people believe they need, as if they are not naturally born with it individually. Like, for example, life principles, or even making their own moral decisions without living in fear of actually accrediting themselves for setting personal goals and achieving them, instead of giving that credit towards a stranger. So realistically, you must be cognizant that an enemy may appear as if it is the light, when it's all an illusion due to reality being based upon what you can see done in the dark. Like if you were to ever create your own country, for example, you are in fact guaranteed protection under your own right. And the government also guarantees this protection as your right. In the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, where it says, quote, Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people peaceably to assemble. Now, obviously, people would generally associate the freedom to assemble, or rather known as freedom of assembly, as a constitutional right that guarantees the protection of an individual to assemble. For example, a protest against some government policy, or the protection against any government interference with an individual assembling their own place of worship, or maybe even to speak freely at their own public or private conference. And while that's all true, it does, however, extend to a greater measure and degree when it comes to fundamental human rights. We can all agree that the words of the English language carry double or more meanings. So when it comes to the words utilized throughout the U.S. Constitution, there is no exception. So where the First Amendment states peaceably to assemble, the word peaceably can be interpreted by the mind relating to being nonviolent. And that's true, but it also carries a legal meaning, which is having the right or freedom to associate. The tranquility enjoyed by a political society internally by the good order which reigns amongst its members, and externally by the good understanding it has with all other nations. Now, that may ring a bell with some of you who are familiar with hearing the term freedom of association, which is normally used interchangeably with freedom of assembly, indicating that they are in fact one and the same. More about that in a moment. The First Amendment states that, quote, Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people peaceably to assemble, which also indicates that the right of the people is such a basic human right that constitutionally, any government is forbidden from trespassing your choice of association. Or, in other words, you reserve the right to be associated with any corporation, society, organization, or government as you please, and any other said government cannot interfere. This very point is also echoed in the definition of constitutional liberty or freedom in the Black's Law Dictionary, stating, quote, such freedom as is enjoyed by citizens of a country or state under the protection of its Constitution, the aggregate of those personal, civil, and political rights of the individual, which are guaranteed by the Constitution and secured against invasion by the government or any of its agencies. So, with that being said, we can easily determine that a government is nothing more than an organization, and Congress is another way of saying assembly. Listen closely. The word Congress is defined as a large formal meeting of representatives from countries or societies at which ideas are discussed and information is exchanged. And then the word assembly is defined as, quote, the concourse or meeting together of a considerable number of persons at the same place, also the persons so gathered. Popular assemblies are those where the people meet to deliberate upon their rights. These are guaranteed by the Constitution, end quote. Now, I mentioned earlier that the term freedom of assembly is commonly used interchangeably with freedom of association. It is defined as, quote, the right to be with other people for a legal reason, cause, or purpose with no bias or interference. A government may be required to allow its citizens to join a particular organization. The bylaws of the organization may yet prohibit accepting some and excluding others. So, in conclusion, creating your own country or county or state is not only achievable, but it is also your fundamental human right. And that right is even protected and guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. So whenever you get tired of marching and protesting and reposting hashtags in hopes that things would change for the better, just note that when you get good and ready, you reserve the right to assemble your very own freedom.